Sir, please? I'm so hungry. Can you help me? The words were whispered, trembling, but they cut through Daniel Cross like a blade. He looked up from his untouched salad at the rooftop bistro. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her jacket was 3 sizes too big, sleeves dragging on the marble floor. Dirt smudged her cheeks. Her braids were coming loose, and her eyes, brown, wide, heartbreakingly earnest, locked onto his with desperation that made his breath catch. Daniel didn't respond. For a moment, he wondered if this was some elaborate prank, a social experiment. But the girl didn't waver. She didn't glance around for cameras or approval. She just stood there, small hands gripping the edge of his table, and whispered again, voice breaking, "Sir, please, I haven't eaten." The word pierced him. Sir, not a stranger, not mister. Sir, like she'd been taught to be polite, even when begging for survival. His instinct was denial, cold logic. I don't know this child. But then he saw it. The way she tilted her head, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her nose. She looked exactly like someone he'd tried to forget, someone he'd lost. Before Daniel could form words, a harsh voice shattered the moment. "What do you think you're doing?" A tall man in a crisp suit strode toward them, face flushed with anger. The restaurant supervisor. He didn't look at Daniel first. His eyes burned into the child like she was vermin. "Where are your parents?" he demanded. "You can't panhandle here." The girl flinched. I just wanted food. With my sir." She pointed at Daniel with trembling fingers. The supervisor scoffed. A cruel, dismissive sound. "That man is not your father. Stop lying. We don't allow begging. You're disturbing the guests." "No." The girl, what was her name, cried out, "Sir." She twisted in his grip, reaching desperately toward Daniel's table. "Please, sir, don't let him take me." The word tore through Daniel's chest like shrapnel. Every carefully constructed wall, every defense mechanism he'd built over decades, crumbled instantly. "Let her go," Daniel said, rising sharply. The supervisor glanced at him, startled, but his grip on the girl only tightened. "Mr. Cross, I apologize for this disruption. These street kids know how to manipulate." The girl screamed when he yanked her backward. She kicked, lost her footing, and in the struggle, the supervisor shoved her aside. She hit the floor hard. The sound was sickening, a dull thud followed by a sharp cry of pain. The girl curled instinctively, hands scraping the tiles. Blood welled from a cut on her temple, where she'd struck the corner of a decorative planter. For one terrible heartbeat, the entire restaurant froze. Then Daniel erupted. "Have you lost your mind?" he roared. The supervisor stumbled back. "Mr. Cross, I didn't." "Get away from her. Now." Daniel dropped to his knees without hesitation, ignoring the whispers, the phones already lifting to record. He reached for the girl carefully, his hands shaking as he cupped her face. "Hey," he said, voice cracking. "Hey, look at me." Her sobs hitched when she met his eyes. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whimpered. "I just wanted to stay with you." Something inside Daniel shattered completely. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said fiercely. He pulled his pocket square from his jacket and pressed it gently to her forehead. "Nothing. Do you understand?" She nodded weakly, still crying. Daniel looked up at the supervisor, his expression glacial in a way that made the man go pale. "If you touch her again, I will personally ensure you never work in the city again." The supervisor stammered. "Mr. Cross, I had no idea you knew she was a child," Daniel said coldly. "That should have been enough." He turned back to the girl and lifted her carefully into his arms. She went rigid at first, unused to being held, then clung to his jacket like he might vanish if she let go. "Sir," she whispered uncertainly. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I've got you." A waiter approached hesitantly. "Sir, should I call someone?" "Yes," Daniel said without looking away from the child. He pulled out his phone with one hand. "But not the police. Not yet." He dialed from memory. "Morgan," he said when the line connected. "I need you at the Belmont rooftop. Immediately. Bring medical supplies. And I want a full background check. Discreet." He ended the call and looked down at the girl again. Can you tell me your name? He asked softly. Jasmine, she sniffled. That's a beautiful name, he said and meant it. She glanced at the table, then back at him. Can I still eat? Or am I in trouble? Daniel swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. You're not in trouble, he said. And yes, you can eat. He carried her to the chair across from him and sat her down gently. When the waiter returned with soup, bread, and water, Jasmine stared at it like it might disappear. If I eat, she whispered, you won't make me leave? Daniel met her eyes, the weight of every choice he'd never made pressing down on him. No, he said, I won't. She took the smallest bite, watching him the entire time. As she ate, Daniel noticed how her hands trembled, how she tried to make herself invisible. This wasn't just hunger. This was a child who had learned that kindness could be taken away at any moment. After a while, she looked up again. You look like my sir, she said quietly. He was called Morgan. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. His fork clattered against the plate. Morgan, he repeated hoarsely, a ghost from a life he'd buried, a mistake he'd refused to acknowledge. Jasmine's eyes widened. Did I say something wrong? No, Daniel said, voice barely steady. You said something important. He looked at her, really looked, and understood with terrifying clarity that this moment was not an accident. It was a reckoning. And as the city buzzed on around them, indifferent and loud, Daniel Cross realized that for the first time in years, he didn't want to run. He wanted to stay. If you felt Daniel's heartbreak, like this story, and comment where you're watching from, you might just find someone nearby watching with you. Daniel Cross didn't care what anyone thought. He had spent a lifetime caring too much about appearances, about control, about keeping everyone at arm's length. But right now, holding a trembling little girl who had called him sir and bled in his presence, nothing else mattered. Jasmine sat beside him now, clutching a napkin gently pressed against the cut on her forehead. Daniel had given it to her himself, kneeling in front of her like a man with no pride left to protect. She dabbed carefully, as if afraid to use too much of the cloth, afraid to take up too much space. Does it hurt? He asked quietly. She shrugged. Not really. I've had worse. The simplicity of her answer stole his breath. Worse. At 5 years old, she had already learned to measure pain on a scale. He reached for his water glass, but his hand trembled as he lifted it. Jasmine noticed, then quickly looked away, as though witnessing his vulnerability frightened her more than her own blood. Do you want more bread? He asked. She nodded once, small and polite. Daniel broke off a piece and slid it toward her on a clean plate. She picked it up like a bird taking seed from an unfamiliar hand, grateful, but ready to flee at any moment. I called someone, he said after a pause. He's a friend. He's going to help us figure out where you belong. Jasmine's chewing slowed. I belong here, she said softly. With you? Daniel blinked. The words caught him off guard, though they shouldn't have. Everything about this child, her gaze, her plea, her scream when the supervisor tried to drag her away, had pointed to one truth. She believed with her whole heart that he was hers. You said your sir's name was Morgan, he said carefully. She nodded. Sir Morgan. Daniel swallowed. The name echoed in his head like a forgotten song pulled from the depths of memory. Do you remember where you used to live? With Sir Morgan. Then after the fire, the lady took me in the night. What lady? I don't know her name. She smelled like chemicals. Said Sir was sleeping too long. Said I had to go with her now. Jasmine's fingers twisted the edge of the napkin. She said nobody else would want me. Daniel's throat tightened. He fought the urge to call Morgan immediately, to demand answers, but he knew better than to make decisions fueled by rage. Not when a child was watching. Not when every word would shape how safe she felt. Morgan is on his way, he said instead. He'll help us find out more. Jasmine didn't look up. Do you think Sir Morgan is still sleeping? Daniel couldn't lie. No, he said gently. I don't think he's sleeping anymore. She didn't cry. That was the worst part. She just nodded, like she already knew, like she'd been waiting for someone to say out loud. They sat in silence. The soup in front of her cooled, untouched. Finally, Daniel pushed his chair back, stood, and offered his hand. Come with me, he said. Jasmine stared at it, hesitant. Where? She whispered. Somewhere quieter. Safer. I won't leave you. Her small hand slid into his, cool, fragile, trusting. They moved through the restaurant like shadows, eyes following every step. The same people who had ignored her minutes ago now watched as though she were part of some unfolding drama. Daniel ignored them. In the private lounge downstairs, away from prying eyes, Morgan was already waiting. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. His expression was calm, but his eyes sharpened when he saw the child. "This her?" he asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Her name is Jasmine." Morgan crouched slightly, his voice gentle. "Hi, Jasmine. I'm Morgan. I'm a friend of your friend's." Jasmine looked at Daniel for confirmation. He nodded, and she gave a tiny wave. "Can you do something for me?" Daniel asked her. "Morgan needs to check your arm, just to make sure you're okay. Can he do that?" Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. Morgan examined her quickly, careful not to frighten her, then looked up. "She's bruised, scraped, but nothing broken. We should get her checked at the hospital." Daniel exhaled. "I'll take her." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I can escort her if—" "No," Daniel interrupted. "She stays with me." Morgan didn't argue. He handed over a folder. "I did a quick search on the name she gave. Morgan. Fire in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago. Man in his 30s, no ID. Found dead in a tenement. Listed as homeless, no next of kin." Daniel took the file slowly. "Morgan," he whispered. "Sound familiar?" Morgan asked. Daniel nodded once. "I think he was someone I used to know." Morgan didn't press. "What do you want to do?" Daniel looked down at Jasmine, who now clung to his pant leg. "I want to find out who she is. Who he was. I want answers." Morgan handed him another sheet. "Start here. DNA tests, paperwork, medical evaluation. She's not a stray, Daniel. If you want to protect her, you need to do it the right way." "I know," Daniel said, his voice unsteady. As Jasmine leaned into his side, Daniel realized something terrifying and undeniable. She had already decided he was her family. Now the question was, would he become the man she already believed he was? He tightened his arm around her shoulder. "We're going to the hospital," he said softly. "Then we'll figure out the rest." Jasmine didn't ask what came next. She just nodded, because for the first time in days, maybe weeks, someone wasn't letting go. The drive to Memorial Hospital was quiet. Jasmine sat in the back seat beside Daniel, a clean towel pressed gently against a shallow cut on her forehead. She hadn't said a word since they left the rooftop restaurant. Her small fingers played with the seatbelt buckle, not to release it, but as if testing whether it was real, whether she was really in a car, really sitting next to the man she still believed was her protector. Daniel kept glancing at her, uncertain what to say. He wasn't used to silence feeling this heavy. Silence was usually his shield, his way of maintaining control. But with Jasmine beside him, it felt more like a test, one he wasn't sure he was passing. The city rushed past the tinted windows. Autumn leaves scattered across the road, horns blaring, chatter drifting, sirens wailing in the distance. But inside the car, only the hum of the engine filled the space between them. "Are you hungry again?" Daniel finally asked. Jasmine shook her head. "You sure?" Another nod. Too quiet. Daniel leaned back, studying her from the corner of his eye. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "I'm not afraid," she said, almost offensively. "I'm afraid of them." "Who?" "The people who take you away." The words twisted inside him like a knife. "No one's taking you anywhere, Jasmine. Not without my say." She looked up, eyes wide. "Because you're the boss?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Something like that." The hospital loomed ahead. White stone, glass walls, the constant shuffle of life and loss moving through its halls. Morgan had called ahead. No emergency room, no waiting in crowded triage. Daniel wasn't interested in headlines, and he wasn't about to hand Jasmine over to a chaotic intake desk. They were met at a side entrance by a nurse and a young pediatrician. Dr. Rivera, warm-eyed, calm-voiced. She crouched at Jasmine's level with practiced ease that immediately softened the child's shoulders. Hi there, Jasmine. I'm Dr. Rivera. I'm just going to take a look at your bump. Okay. Nothing scary. Jasmine didn't answer, but she looked at Daniel, who gave her a small nod. That seemed to be enough. Inside a quiet exam room, Jasmine perched on the edge of the bed. Daniel stood nearby, arms crossed, still in his dark blazer, watching every movement. Silent but present. Protective. She's got a minor cut, Dr. Rivera confirmed, dabbing gently with antiseptic. We'll clean it. No stitches needed. Some bruising on the shoulder and elbow, but no signs of deeper trauma. Physically, she's holding up. Daniel raised an eyebrow, and emotionally, Dr. Rivera's expression grew cautious. That's harder to say. She's showing signs of stress-induced suppression. Hypervigilance. She's clearly been neglected, possibly abandoned. Can we run a DNA test? The doctor hesitated. Is there a legal guardian present? I'm working on that, Daniel replied. For now, let's assume I am. Dr. Rivera didn't argue. She nodded and signaled for a nurse to collect the necessary kit. Jasmine, the doctor said gently, we're going to take a little swab from your cheek. It won't hurt. I promise. Jasmine barely blinked. The nurse swabbed her mouth quickly, efficiently. She stayed still the whole time, as if she'd learned long ago not to make things harder for grown-ups. Once the test was done, Jasmine leaned against the wall, clearly tired. Her legs dangled off the bed's edge, not quite touching the floor. Dr. Rivera lowered her voice as she pulled Daniel aside. You said her sir's name might have been Morgan? That's what she told me. Dr. Rivera glanced at the clipboard in her hands. We had an unidentified male brought in 2 weeks ago from a building fire in Brooklyn, burned beyond recognition. The only clue we had was a melted dog tag with the name Morgan L. No confirmed ID. No one claimed the body. Daniel's jaw clenched. Do you still have him? She nodded. We have him stored pending further investigation. No known relatives came forward. We've been waiting for a match through the missing person system. I want his DNA compared to hers. Quietly, Dr. Rivera looked at him more closely now. You think she's his daughter? I know she is. The doctor nodded solemnly. I'll start the comparison. But Daniel, what if this turns out the way I think it will? There's going to be a lot of red tape ahead. CPS, the court's custody issues. I don't care. Just find out. Back inside the room, Jasmine was lying on her side, curled up. Her shoes, too small and worn, sat neatly on the floor beside her. She was watching Daniel through half-lidded eyes. Are you going to leave now? She asked. Daniel pulled a chair closer and sat beside her, elbows on his knees. No, he said. I'm not going anywhere. My other sir left when the fire came. I waited. He didn't come back. He didn't want to leave you, Daniel said quietly. Jasmine didn't respond right away. He said if anything ever happened, I should look for someone who looked like him. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You look like him. Daniel sat very still, trying to breathe past the tightness in his throat. I think he meant me, she added. He swallowed hard. Outside the room, the city moved on. Children were born, lives ended, ambulances came and went. But inside that small corner of the hospital, time slowed. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo from his wallet, one he hadn't looked at in years. It was old, creased at the corners, showing a much younger version of himself and another man who looked nearly identical, a face from his past. He handed it to Jasmine. That's him, she said immediately. That's Sir Morgan. That's my sir. Daniel closed his eyes, his heart pounding. So it was true, all of it. And now she was his. Not by blood, not yet confirmed, but by something deeper, something chosen, something salvageable. That night, Daniel crossed and returned to his penthouse. Instead, he sat in a quiet waiting area just off the pediatric ward at Memorial Hospital, one floor below the maternity wing, where he'd once paced the halls waiting for a child who never came home. Now, 20 years later, another child slept in a hospital bed down the hall. A child who called him sir without knowing the depth of what she said. A child who shared the eyes, the fear, and he now knew the blood of the son he had turned away decades ago. He held the photo in his hands again, the one he'd given to Jasmine. Two young men, Daniel and Morgan, shoulder to shoulder at a youth shelter fundraiser. Same jawline, same thick eyebrows, but different smiles. Daniel's was polite, restrained. Morgan's was hopeful, honest. He hadn't seen that face in 20 years. Morgan returned, walking quietly, holding a plain manila envelope. Daniel stood before he even spoke. What do we know? Morgan handed him the envelope. Dr. Rivera rushed a match. Her credentials helped push it through. Daniel opened it and read the results. Paternity match, 99.94% probability. Jasmine is the biological granddaughter of Daniel Cross. For a moment, the air was too thick to breathe. Daniel sat down slowly, letting the truth settle. Morgan had been his son, and Jasmine, the small, wide-eyed girl who had mistaken him for her father, was his only living blood relative. Morgan broke the silence. You okay? Daniel didn't answer immediately. His fingers curled around the edge of the report. She called me, sir, he said softly, and I didn't stop her. She needed someone, Morgan replied. She still does. I turned Morgan away, Daniel whispered. He came to me once, years ago. I didn't recognize him. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to. Morgan sat beside him. Regret doesn't undo what's already happened, but it can decide what happens next. Daniel nodded slowly. She's staying with me, he said. I don't care what it takes. Lawyers, judges, whatever hoops the state wants to build. I'm not letting her go. Morgan leaned back, arms crossed. I figured you'd say that. I already contacted Linda Hayes. Daniel blinked. The family court attorney? She owes you a favor. I figured you'd want the best. Daniel nodded. You figured right. At that moment, a soft voice interrupted them. Mr. Cross? Dr. Rivera had returned, holding a folder. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharper now, more assessing. I saw the results, she said. Are you ready to talk next steps? Daniel stood. Yes. In the short term, she began, you can file for emergency temporary guardianship. It'll keep CPS out of the picture while you move forward. But long term, you'll need to petition for permanent custody or adoption. Done, Daniel said. Whatever paperwork is needed, I'll sign it tonight. Dr. Rivera nodded. I'll notify the social worker on call. We'll expedite the process. Daniel glanced down the hall. How's she doing? She's resting. She didn't ask for anything except one thing. What? She asked if she could eat breakfast with you. Daniel's throat tightened. Tell her yes. The doctor smiled, soft and genuine. I already did. The next morning, Daniel arrived early, balancing a tray of pancakes, strawberries, and warm syrup from the hospital cafeteria. He didn't usually carry anything himself, not phones, not coffee, not documents. But today it felt important. Jasmine was sitting up in bed when he entered, hugging her knees under the blanket. Her forehead was bandaged, and someone had brushed her hair back with gentle hands. She looked small, cleaner, but no less fragile. When she saw him, her face lit up with cautious hope. You came back. I said I would. She nodded, satisfied. You brought pancakes? I did. She reached for the tray, then hesitated. Can I eat first, or do you have to talk to people? Daniel shook his head. You eat. That's the most important thing right now. She beamed and dug in carefully, using the plastic fork and napkin like someone who had been taught rules but never given permission to break them. Daniel watched her eat in silence. After a few bites, Jasmine looked up. Are you going to stay my sir now? The question was quiet, but it didn't come from confusion. It came from longing. Daniel set down his coffee. I want to be, but I need to do some things first so I can make sure no one takes you away again. Even the lady who said I was trouble, especially her. Jasmine took another bite, chewed slowly. Sir Morgan said if anything ever happened, he hoped someone nice would find me. She looked up again. You're nice. Daniel didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded letter Morgan had found at the shelter near the Brooklyn fire. It had been water damaged, parts unreadable, but the closing line remained clear. If anyone ever finds my girl, please don't let her grow up thinking she wasn't wanted. He looked at Jasmine eating pancakes with syrup smeared on her cheek, eyes flicking to him like she was still afraid he'd vanish, and he felt it in his bones. I won't let you grow up thinking that, he said, voice rough. Not ever. She smiled, leaned over, and whispered, Okay, sir. And in that small, sunlit hospital room, Daniel Cross, the billionaire, the tycoon, the man known for firing board members without blinking, felt something unfamiliar swell in his chest. Not guilt, not power, not even grief. Hope. Daniel Cross stood in front of the elevator, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding a legal envelope from the hospital's administration. Behind him, through the glass door of room 414, Jasmine was sleeping again, one arm around the hospital's teddy bear, the other gripping the corner of his blazer. She refused to let go of it until her eyes shut. He hadn't meant to stay overnight. But when she woke at 3 a.m. crying for Sir Morgan and clung to him like the world would vanish if she let go, he didn't have it in him to leave. The room had a recliner meant for parents. For the first time in years, Daniel used one. Now it was morning again, and everything had changed. The DNA results were real. The hospital had filed the temporary guardianship forms with the city clerk. Dr. Rivera had personally walked him through next steps, adding only one request. Be sure, she'd said. This child has already been left too many times. He was sure, but certainty didn't quiet the voice in his head, the one whispering about everything he should have done 2 decades earlier. The elevator doors opened. Mr. Cross. Morgan's voice broke through the fog of Daniel's thoughts. The head of security stepped out of the lift with a neutral expression, but his tone had weight to it, like he'd seen something he hadn't expected to. You got something? Daniel asked. Morgan nodded. You said you wanted everything on Morgan. Daniel glanced around, then gestured toward the consultation room nearby. Once inside, Morgan locked the door and pulled out a small USB drive from his coat pocket, along with a stack of printed transcripts. Found 2 voicemails, Morgan said. One left on an old business line. The other never made it past the automated operator. It was deleted, but stored on a mirrored backup server. We pulled it before it wiped. Daniel's stomach tightened. From Morgan? Morgan handed him the paper. Daniel read the first message. It was dated 6 years ago. Mr. Cross, you don't know me, but I think I'm your son. My name is Morgan. I'm not asking for anything. I'd like to talk. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But if I'm right, then I've spent my whole life not knowing who I am, and I'm just tired of wondering. My number is... The message cut off. Daniel sat down, the transcript trembling slightly in his grip. The second voicemail was even harder to read. The words had been transcribed phonetically, low quality, broken, but unmistakably from the same voice. Don't know if you'll hear this. Don't know if you care. But I'm scared. My daughter, she's all I have. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, if you hear this, don't let her end up in the system. She's good. Better than me. Don't let her think she's a mistake. The timestamp. 2 weeks ago. The same night Morgan died. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of it pressing against his chest. He had called twice. And both times, Daniel hadn't picked up. Once because he didn't recognize the number. The second time because he'd shut down that particular business line years ago. I never heard these, he said aloud. Morgan gave a tight nod. No one did. Until now. Daniel stared at the ceiling, the lights above him flickering faintly. He was trying. Morgan said simply. Daniel looked down at his hands. And I didn't even know he existed. There it was. The unbearable truth. He had been so careful, so calculated. Every deal, every risk measured. But somehow the most important stake of his life, family, had slipped through his hands unnoticed. Or maybe he had refused to look. He stood abruptly. What do we know about the woman who took Jasmine after Morgan died? She's not in the system, Morgan replied. No ID, no custody records. Likely under the radar. Possibly part of a street-level network for child exploitation. Uses kids to panhandle. We're tracking her. Daniel's jaw clenched. I want her found. Now. We're working on it. And when you do? Morgan raised a brow. Let the lawyers handle it? No, Daniel said. Let me? Morgan didn't push back. There was a knock at the door. A hospital administrator peeked in. Mr. Cross, sorry to interrupt. The judge signed off on your emergency guardianship. You're officially listed as Jasmine's temporary custodian. CPS has been notified, but since you're complied with the formal process, they're stepping back for now. Daniel nodded, emotion flickering behind his otherwise calm expression. Thank you. The administrator hesitated. She's a lucky girl. Daniel's gaze turned cold. No, I'm the one who's lucky. I just realized it too late. Back in the hospital room, Jasmine was awake again. Her cheeks were pink from sleep, and she was playing silently with the bear Dr. Rivera had left for her. When Daniel entered, she looked up. Did you come back again? I told you, he said, settling beside her. I'm not going anywhere. She watched him for a moment. Are we going to your house now? Soon. They're finishing some papers first. Is it a big house? It's quiet, he said, but it's safe. Is there room for me? He paused. There wasn't before, but there will be now. Jasmine smiled softly, then reached for the photo he'd left on the table, the one of Daniel and Morgan. She touched it carefully, one small finger tracing the corner where her father's smile still lived. Do you think he knew you were his dad? Daniel couldn't speak. He just nodded. Do you think he was sad? He looked at her. Yes, but I think he was also proud. She rested her head against his arm. He said grown-ups don't always come back. But you did. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered, I almost didn't. Jasmine's hand found his. But you're here now. He tightened his grip gently. Yes, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. Daniel's brownstone sat tucked away on a quiet street in the Upper West Side, framed by ivy-wrapped gates and stone gargoyles perched on the corners of marble steps. It was the kind of place that made people lower their voices when passing by, unsure if they belonged on the same sidewalk. Jasmine hesitated at the foot of the stairs. She held the hand of the man she still called sir, though no one had confirmed yet if that title would remain. She wore a clean hoodie now, navy blue, 2 sizes too big but warm, and her scraped knees peeked out from donated hospital jeans. In her other hand was the teddy bear. She gripped both like lifelines. Is this where you live? She asked, voice so soft it almost didn't make it through the autumn breeze. Daniel nodded. It's home. Yours too, for now. Jasmine squinted at the massive front door. Are there other kids? No, just us. She frowned, then whispered, so no one to share the pancakes with? Daniel almost smiled. No one. You get every last one. Jasmine seemed unsure whether that was a good thing. Inside, the warmth of polished wood floors and soft lighting greeted them. The house was immaculate. Every detail precisely where it was meant to be. Cold, beautiful, untouched. But as they stepped into the entry hall, Daniel saw it through her eyes for the first time. Too clean, too quiet, too empty. She didn't step in right away. Her fingers clenched tighter around his. Are you sure I can be here? She asked. Daniel bent slightly, lowering his voice. Yes, but you don't have to rush. Take your time. They removed their shoes together. Jasmine lined hers up beside his, adjusting the right one 3 times until it looked just right. Then finally, she stepped across the threshold. A housekeeper appeared from the hallway. Margaret, in her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair tied in a perfect bun. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the girl. Daniel gave her a subtle nod. Margaret recovered instantly. Welcome home, Miss Jasmine, she said with a warm smile. Would you like a snack? Jasmine blinked. No adult had ever called her Miss anything. Daniel spoke gently. Margaret makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the state of New York. Jasmine still didn't answer. She just looked between them like she didn't trust it yet. I'll eat if you eat, she said finally. Daniel nodded. Deal. They sat at the small kitchen table instead of the grand dining room. It was more lived in here. The hum of the old refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock, the warm smell of cheddar melting in buttered bread. Jasmine sat on her knees to reach the table, napkin tucked carefully in her collar. She took small bites, always watching him. Halfway through the sandwich, she whispered, "Where's my room?" Daniel set down his coffee cup. "It used to be someone else's, but now it's yours." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. "Was it your son's?" Henry inhaled. "Yes." She didn't seem bothered, just nodded like that made sense. "Is he gone too?" "Yes," Daniel said softly. 3 years ago. Did he get sick? No, it was an accident. Jasmine chewed slowly. "Is that why you look sad sometimes, even when you smile?" Daniel stilled. She wasn't asking like a child looking for sympathy. She was asking like someone who had seen enough sadness to recognize it in other people. He looked at her. Maybe that's why." She nodded and took another bite. After lunch, Daniel led her upstairs. She walked slowly, her fingertips grazing the banister, like she needed to be sure it wouldn't disappear beneath her. He opened the door to the old guest room, once meant for visiting family, now stripped bare except for a twin bed, a desk, and a small bookshelf. "It's not perfect yet," he said. "We'll fix it up together." Jasmine stepped inside cautiously. She didn't ask to touch anything. She just walked around the room once, made a small circle, then sat on the bed's edge. "I never a bed with corners before." Daniel frowned. "Corners? Like this?" She gestured at the clean angles of the frame. "Usually it's just a blanket on the floor." The words landed hard. Daniel cleared his throat. "You can jump on this one if you want." Jasmine looked scandalized. "But it's clean." He smiled faintly. "It'll still be clean after you jump." She didn't jump. Instead, she lay back slowly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Daniel stood in the doorway, unsure whether to stay or give her space. "You can go," she said quietly. "You want me to?" She hesitated. "No, but I don't want to ask you to stay, in case you go." Daniel crossed the room and sat in the chair beside the desk. "I'll stay." They didn't speak again for a long time. That evening, Daniel stood alone in his study, staring at a picture frame that hadn't been touched in years. A photo of a woman with laughing eyes, someone who had left long before the funeral, long before the silence. His ex-wife, gone to Europe, remarried. She had never wanted children. Neither had he, back then, until Morgan came knocking, until Jasmine arrived. Morgan called just after sunset. "She's been spotted." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Where?" "Lower East Side, corner of Essex and Delancey. Same routine. 2 other kids. Rotating shifts begging. 1 adult supervising." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Get a team. I want her picked up. But quietly. No press." "We'll move tonight," Morgan said. "Are you sure you want to be involved in this part?" "I wasn't involved when Morgan needed me," Daniel replied. "I'll be damned if I'm absent again." When he returned to Jasmine's room later, she was asleep again, curled around a new blanket, her teddy bear between her knees. The nightlight glowed soft amber. Daniel stood at the door for a moment, then walked in. He adjusted the blanket slightly, brushing a curl away from her face. She stirred. "Sir, I'm here. Are you to stay this time?" He didn't pause. "Yes, I am." And for the first time since she'd arrived, Jasmine didn't double-check the answer. She just went back to sleep. The air outside Essex and Delancey was thick with the city's after-dark rhythm. Sirens in the distance, the rumble of subway grates, the quiet, uneasy shuffle of those trying to disappear. Morgan leaned against the unmarked sedan parked just off the alley. He checked his watch. 10:30 p.m., we have visual, one of the operatives confirmed through the earpiece. The woman's inside with 3 minors. Same one that took Jasmine. Daniel sat in the back seat, still in his suit, tie loosened. His hands were steepled in front of his face, jaw locked. He wasn't the kind of man who liked being involved in logistics. His power moved through contracts and calls, not boots on the ground. But tonight, he wasn't Daniel Cross the billionaire. He was a man hunting justice for the child upstairs, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. "Do we know her name yet?" he asked. Morgan nodded. "Rita Lang. Multiple aliases. 2 prior arrests, neglect, petty theft, possible trafficking ties. Nothing ever stuck. Slips through the cracks. Not this time. Daniel's voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The door across the street creaked open. The woman appeared, dragging a small boy by the arm while barking at another to stay close. Her voice echoed down the alley, shrill and sharp. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. Morgan's team moved in. 2 men in plain clothes flanked her, without a word. One produced credentials. The other blocked her exit. The children were gently pulled aside. "Hey, you got no right," she began. Morgan stepped out of the shadows. "You remember Jasmine?" Her mouth clamped shut. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer. "She's safe now. And you're done." As she was handcuffed and read her rights, Daniel finally stepped from the car. Their eyes met. Recognition flared in hers. And for the first time, fear. "You're her, sir," she spat. Daniel didn't answer. "She cried for me, you know," she sneered. "Cried for me every night. I fed her, clothed her. That little brat wouldn't have lasted a day without me." Daniel's voice was ice. "And you still let her bleed in front of strangers." Rita lunged, restrained instantly by Morgan's team. "You rich pigs think you can buy everything," she hissed. Daniel stepped closer, calm. "Not everything, but I can end what you started." She was shoved into the car and driven off without further noise. Morgan approached. "The kids will be taken in safely. We've already called family services. No press, no leaks." Daniel nodded. "Make sure they don't vanish." "They won't." He looked up at the building, eyes narrowing. "You ever think," he said quietly, "that ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt decisions." Morgan didn't respond. He didn't have to. The next morning, Daniel sat across from Jasmine at the kitchen table again. She wore a yellow sweatshirt that Margaret had laid out. Sleeves rolled up, her curls pulled back with a pink ribbon she'd chosen herself. Her plate was stacked with toast, strawberries, and tiny cut-up sausages. Daniel had never thought of breakfast as anything more than fuel. Today it felt sacred. Jasmine bit into her toast and spoke with a full mouth. "Can I go to school?" Daniel blinked. "You want to?" She nodded. "I want to learn real stuff, like how to write in cursive." He smiled. "You got a favorite subject?" "Reading." "You're already ahead of most CEOs I know." Jasmine grinned, then hesitated. "Will they let me go? Even though I'm not like you." Daniel paused. "You mean because of your skin?" She nodded slowly. He leaned forward. "Jasmine, listen to me. Anyone who makes you feel less than because of your color, your past, your pain, is someone who's afraid of what you'll become when you know your worth." She didn't fully understand. Not yet, but she smiled because she understood him. "Can you read with me?" He reached for the book she handed him, The Velveteen Rabbit. She climbed onto his lap before he could open it. He didn't mind. They read slowly, her finger pointing to each word. When they reached a line that read, "Once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always." She looked up at him. "Am I real now?" Daniel touched her cheek gently. "You always were." That afternoon, Linda Hayes arrived at the brownstone with 2 thick folders and 3 paralegals. She had practiced family law for 30 years, but even she was stunned when Daniel Cross, the coldest executive in New York real estate, had called her personally. She reviewed the guardianship paperwork, pre-filled the adoption forms, and laid out the steps with mechanical efficiency. Daniel signed everything. No hesitation. "You're taking this seriously," she noted. He looked at Jasmine, who was in the corner braiding Margaret's scarf around her bear's neck. "I don't do anything halfway," he said. "Not anymore." Linda smiled. "Well, let's make it official." She opened a folder and slid over a pen. Daniel picked it up and paused over the line. "Petition requests full parental custody of minor child, Jasmine Rose Lang." "Lang?" he asked. "It was the last name on her hospital band," Linda said. "Morgan must have used it as an alias. She has no formal birth certificate. We'll have to re-register her." Daniel stared at the name. Morgan Lang. He'd never known the boy's last name. Had never asked. He signed the form. Under parental name, he wrote, "Daniel Cross." That evening, As the city lit up in its usual golden shimmer, Jasmine sat in the guest room, which was slowly becoming her room, drawing with a set of colored pencils Daniel had brought home himself. He watched her from the doorway. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She held it up. It was a house with a tree. 2 stick figures in front, one tall, one small. Underneath, in careful, uneven handwriting, it said, "Me and Sir." "Home." Daniel stepped in, knelt beside her, and kissed her forehead. "That's the best thing I've ever seen," he whispered. And this time, he didn't just mean the drawing. 2 weeks had passed. In that time, Daniel Cross had signed more paperwork than he had during his last 3 mergers combined. Emergency guardianship became formal. Court hearings were scheduled. Jasmine's room was painted pale lavender, her choice, because it feels like clouds and dreams, she said. She had picked a comforter herself, white with little yellow stars. He bought it without blinking. Each day, she grew a little more into the space. Still cautious, still asking permission to touch framed photos or sit on the couch. But the tremble in her voice was fading. Slowly, she was replacing fear with familiarity. And Daniel was changing too. He didn't go into the office. Not once. He conducted calls from home, but only after breakfast with Jasmine, and only after helping her tie her sneakers. 1 loop at a time. Now, on a crisp Tuesday morning, he stood in the admissions office of a small private school on the Upper East Side. Jasmine clung to his hand, dressed in a navy jumper and white collared shirt. The sleeves were too long. Her backpack was nearly bigger than she was. But she looked up at him with that same questioning gaze she gave him every morning. "You sure they'll let me in?" she whispered. Daniel squeezed her hand. "They'd be lucky to have you." The school's headmaster entered, an older black woman named Mrs. Patricia Monroe. Her voice was warm, but there was steel beneath it. "Mr. Cross," she said, shaking his hand. "And this must be Jasmine." Jasmine looked down. "Hi. Would you like to see your classroom?" Jasmine looked up at Daniel. He nodded. "Go ahead. I'll be right here." Mrs. Monroe extended a hand. "Come on, sweetheart." Jasmine hesitated, then let go of Daniel's hand and followed. He watched her go, the way she walked a little straighter, the way her fingers still fidgeted at her sides. She'd lived a life of looking over her shoulder. Now, he hoped she'd start learning to look ahead. Mrs. Monroe returned 10 minutes later. "She's quiet," she said, "but she listens, observes everything." She helped a boy tie his shoes without being asked. Daniel exhaled softly. "That sounds like her." Mrs. Monroe tilted her head. "She told me you weren't her first sir, but you're her real one." Daniel's chest tightened. "Did she say anything else?" "She said, when she first came to live with you, her tummy stopped hurting every night." He looked down, blinking once. "She doesn't know her alphabet perfectly," Mrs. Monroe continued, "and her reading level is behind. But she's smart. You can tell. And resilient." Daniel nodded. "She's a fighter." Mrs. Monroe studied him for a moment. "You know, I've had wealthy men donate to the school before, but none have walked in here holding their daughter's hand." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he said simply, "I wasn't always that man." "Well," she replied, smiling gently, "now you are." Later that day, Daniel took Jasmine to the park. It had become part of their rhythm now. After school, after lunch, a slow walk down to Central Park where she could climb, run, and forget everything that came before. He stayed close. He always stayed close. She ran between trees, her laughter bouncing between branches, her hair catching the wind. Daniel sat on a nearby bench, watching her play. 2 older women across from him murmured. Then one leaned over. "She's yours." He nodded. "She's lovely." Daniel smiled. "Thank you." The woman hesitated. "Forgive me. It's just not something you see every day." He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. A rich white man, a little black girl, sitting together like family. He didn't need their validation, but he appreciated the curiosity wasn't wrapped in judgment this time. When Jasmine came running back with a pine cone in each hand, she shouted, "Sir, look what I found." Daniel held out his hand, took the pine cone like it was treasure. That's a fine one. The women across the bench smiled. And for the first time in his life, Daniel realized he was sitting somewhere where his name wasn't feared. He wasn't Mr. Cross. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't a calculation. He was just a man with his daughter. That night, after dinner, Jasmine asked a question. "Can I have a picture of Sir Morgan?" Daniel looked up from his laptop. "You want put in your room?" She nodded. "Next to ours." He stood, walked over the bookshelf, and pulled down a leather folder. Inside were a few saved photographs Morgan had found, pulled from shelters, old IDs, even one blurry Polaroid from a donation center in Brooklyn. He handed her one. It showed Morgan, younger, maybe mid-20s, holding Jasmine as a baby. His eyes were tired but proud, his smile uneven, unsure. She took it reverently. "Do you think he's proud of me?" she asked. Daniel knelt beside her. "I think he was proud of you every second of his life." She pressed the photo to her chest. "I want to be good," she whispered, "so he can see me." Daniel hugged her tightly. "You already are." She looked up. "Do you think he'd like you?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope so. I think he'd be glad you're someone who will never leave." She nodded. "Even when I get messy?" He kissed her hair, especially then. As she drifted asleep that night, the photo tucked beside her bed, Daniel watched the rise and fall of her chest beneath the covers. He was learning, day by day, what it meant to stay. And for once, staying didn't feel like punishment. It felt like purpose. Daniel stood in the doorway of what used to be his son's bedroom. It had been untouched for nearly 3 years. The bed stayed made. The shelves dusted weekly by staff under strict instruction. But nothing had been added, removed, or adjusted. Not since the accident. Not since the night Daniel got the call and stood frozen in his hallway for hours, unable to cross the threshold into a world that had belonged to a boy he had barely known. Now Jasmine stood in the same doorway, one hand clutching the teddy bear she carried everywhere, the other curled around the frame like she needed support to face what was inside. "Is this your son's room?" she asked. Daniel nodded quietly. It was. She didn't step inside right away. She looked up at him first. "Can I see it?" He offered his hand. She took it, and together they crossed the invisible line between past and present. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. The curtains were drawn back, letting golden morning light pour over the bed, still made with a navy comforter and a single pillow. Baseball posters clung to the walls, along with a few yellowing sticky notes above the desk, scribbled quotes, math reminders, and one small drawing that said, "Dad, don't forget our game. 6 p.m. sharp." Daniel looked away. Jasmine, meanwhile, moved like she was in a museum, her feet barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. She paused at a bookshelf, where dog-eared copies of Hatchet and The Giver sat beside a row of neatly arranged figurines. She ran her fingers along the spines. Was he kind? Daniel cleared his throat. "Yes, very." "Did he laugh a lot?" Daniel smiled, pained. He had a big, loud laugh. The kind that made everyone else laugh, too. Jasmine touched one of the books gently. "Do you miss him every day?" Daniel nodded solemnly. "Do you think he'd be mad if I use his room?" Daniel knelt beside her. "No," he said softly. "I think he'd want someone brave to live here. Someone good." "Like me?" "Exactly like you." She bit her lip, thinking. Then, with a small breath of courage, she climbed onto the bed. The mattress creaked softly beneath her weight. She sat still for a moment, as if waiting for something bad to happen. When it didn't, she smiled. "I like it here," she said. "It feels strong." Daniel felt the words land deep. She wasn't wrong. This room had seen pain, yes, but it had also seen love, potential, dreams. Maybe it could see them again. That afternoon, Daniel went to his office for the first time in weeks. His assistant nearly dropped her coffee when he walked through the glass doors. "Mr. Cross, we weren't expecting you." "I won't be long," he said, already heading toward the elevator. Inside the executive suite, the walls were as he'd left them, modern, minimalist, sterile. The view of Manhattan stretched like a painting behind his desk. He sat down but didn't log into his computer. Instead, he pulled out a photo, the same one Jasmine had kept by her bedside, and placed it beside a new frame. A candid shot from the park last weekend. Jasmine mid-laugh, crumbs on her cheek, eyes wide with joy. Morgan and Jasmine side by side, father and daughter, and now his family. He looked at the two images and said aloud to the empty room, "I should have opened that door." Morgan entered quietly a moment later. "You're here early." Daniel didn't look up. "I came to pack." Morgan blinked. "Pack." Daniel stood, taking only a single folder from his desk. "I'm not coming back. Not the same way, anyway." "You're retiring?" "I'm changing," Daniel said. "And the company's going to have to change with me." Morgan studied him. "This about Jasmine?" "It's about everything I missed," Daniel said. "I don't want to keep missing it." He glanced out the window. "Turns out, building towers doesn't mean much if there's no one in them who calls you home." Morgan didn't argue. That night, Jasmine was curled up on the couch, watching the Iron Giant with a blanket around her shoulders. Her head rested on Daniel's arm. Halfway through the movie, she spoke without turning her head. "Was your son scared?" Daniel paused the movie. When he went away. Daniel took a slow breath. "I don't think so. He was brave. Like you." She looked up. "Do you think he's with Sir Morgan?" "I like to think they're watching together." She nodded, satisfied. "I hope they're not too mad." "About what?" "About me using the room." Daniel wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "They're not mad." She closed her eyes. "Okay, I just don't want anyone to think I stole it." Daniel kissed her hair. "No one will ever take anything from you again. Not on my watch." She smiled sleepily. "Promise?" "Promise." As she drifted off, the television flickering softly in the background, Daniel leaned back and looked at the framed photos on the mantel. Morgan, his son, and now Jasmine. 3 names. 3 lives woven into one second chance. The conference room on the 48th floor across International was built for intimidation. Glass walls, a skyline backdrop, and a table long enough to seat the most powerful men and women in Manhattan real estate. For decades, Daniel Cross had ruled this room with a glance. His word was final, his reputation carved into polished walnut and reinforced steel. But today, he entered the room not as a titan, but as a father. The partners were already seated, murmuring quietly as he approached. Suits pressed, ties straightened, iPads aglow with reports and projections. But every conversation stopped when Daniel stepped in. His presence hadn't diminished, even if his priorities had shifted. He took the seat at the head of the table, calmly unbuttoning his blazer. "You're here," said Vincent Brooks, a senior partner with salt and pepper hair and a sharp voice that usually preceded criticism. "We weren't sure you still considered yourself active." "I am," Daniel said, "but not in the way you think." Vincent leaned forward. "There's concern, Daniel. The board hasn't seen a quarterly projection in weeks. You missed a London merger meeting. Investors are nervous." Daniel didn't flinch. "Let them be." A pause followed. Then another voice, Sophia Chun, VP of Legal, cut in with careful tone. "There's also the matter of your guardianship filings. It's public record now. The media has been slow to pick it up, but if it breaks, it already has," Daniel said. "I released a statement myself this morning." Whispers flared around the table. Vincent looked stunned. "You what?" "I told him the truth," Daniel continued, "that a young girl entered my life unexpectedly, that she's family, that I am seeking full custody, and that I will no longer tolerate the perception that empathy is a weakness. This company was built on precision, not sentiment." Vincent shot back. "This company," Daniel replied evenly, "was built by a man who thought power made him untouchable. That same man missed a chance to meet his son until it was too late." The room fell into uneasy silence. "Morgan," Daniel said, his voice lower. "His name was Morgan. He was mine. I never claimed him. Not when he knocked on my door at 20. Not when he begged for a meeting 5 years later. And now he's gone. But he left behind a daughter. And I will not fail her." Vincent shifted in his seat. This is a private matter, Daniel." "No," Daniel said. "It's personal. And that's different. Personal is what you take with you when the office lights shut off. Personal is what you remember when your title doesn't matter anymore. He stood slowly, placing a folder on the table. In this folder, he continued, our document appointing Sophia as interim CEO. I'll remain in an advisory role. My priorities have changed, but the company's foundation won't shift. I've ensured continuity. You have nothing to panic about. Sophia's eyebrows rose. Daniel, are you sure? Never been more. He looked at Vincent, whose face had paled. And for the record, Daniel added, if this company can't survive the presence of a child in my life, then it was never strong to begin with. When Daniel returned home later that afternoon, the first thing he heard was laughter. Not TV laughter. Not the polite, social kind either. Real, unfiltered child laughter. It was coming from the guest room. Her room now. He walked quietly toward it and peeked through the door. Jasmine was on the floor with Margaret, surrounded by building blocks and stuffed animals. She was mid-story, gesturing wildly as the bear rescued the dinosaur from a collapsing tower. And then Sir Bear said, don't be afraid. I'm not going anywhere. Daniel froze. Margaret saw him first and smiled gently. Jasmine turned, bright-eyed. Sir. He smiled, stepping inside. What's going on in here? Emergency, she declared. Mr. Dino was stuck on the blanket cave, but I saved him, and Sir Bear helped. Well, he said, crouching, sounds like I missed some very important heroics. Jasmine crawled into his lap without hesitation. Did you have a big meeting today? Daniel nodded. I did. Did you win? I didn't need to. She tilted her head. Then what happened? I made a decision. A big one. She leaned forward. Was it scary? A little. But you did it? He kissed the top of her head. Yes, because of you. She beamed. Because I'm brave? He smiled. Because we're brave. That evening, Daniel stood in front of the fireplace, holding a glass of water. No scotch. No wine. He hadn't touched alcohol in weeks. Jasmine was upstairs brushing her teeth, singing quietly to herself, off-key and joyful. Morgan stood nearby, reviewing documents. You sure you want to let Sophia run the company? He asked. She's earned it, Daniel replied. And I want Jasmine to know me as something more than a name on a building. Morgan nodded slowly. You're not afraid they'll forget who built it? Daniel looked up at the mantel, where a new photo now sat, Jasmine drawing with sidewalk chalk, grinning up at him. No, he said. They'll remember. But more importantly, she will. Morgan watched him for a long moment. Truth is, he said finally, I never thought I'd see you like this. Neither did I. Was it worth surrendering? Daniel set the glass down. But I'm glad I did. From upstairs, Jasmine called out, Sir, you forgot bedtime story. Daniel smiled. No, he said softly, already moving. I'm right on time. The first storm of November rolled in early that morning, the kind of East Coast gray that hung heavy in the sky like an omen. Rain whispered against the windows of the brownstone, and Jasmine stood quietly in front of the large living room window, one palm pressed to the glass. She's out there, she whispered. Daniel turned from the kitchen where he was preparing a late breakfast. Who is? The lady who used to yell at me. Her voice was barely audible. She doesn't like the cold. Her fingers always turned purple. Henry set the spatula down and crossed to her. You don't have to think about her anymore, he said gently. Jasmine didn't move. But what if she finds me? She won't. She might, Jasmine insisted. She found me every time. Even when Sir Morgan tried to hide me, she always found me. He looked into her eyes, too young to carry so much fear. You're safe here, he said. This house has strong locks and stronger people. Jasmine frowned. But you're not always here. I am now, he said. And even when I'm not right next to you, you're never alone. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned against him, her small body trembling slightly. He held her, letting the silence do the work. At the precinct, Morgan stood in the corner of a sterile room, watching through the one-way glass. On the other side of the mirror sat Rita Lang, arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes simmering with defiance. Her lawyer sat beside her, fidgeting nervously with a pen. "She's still not talking," Morgan said into his earpiece. Daniel's voice came through. "What's she waiting for? A headline? Or a price?" Morgan muttered. Daniel's silence said everything. The detective on the other side of the mirror leaned in, voice even. "We have you on surveillance. Eyewitness statements from 3 children. There's nowhere to run this time." Rita rolled her eyes. "Yeah? And what do I get if I talk?" The detective didn't blink. "You get less time. Maybe." Rita leaned forward, sneering. "I want a deal, and I want him to know I'm not afraid of him." Morgan stepped away from the glass. "She wants to be famous," he said. Daniel responded calmly. "Then don't give her that." Back at the brownstone, Daniel found Jasmine sitting cross-legged on a rug in her room, building a tower from books, blocks, and stuffed animals. "What's that?" he asked. "A fortress." "For what?" "In case she comes back." Daniel sat beside her. "You really think this will stop her?" "No," Jasmine said honestly, "but it makes me feel better." He nodded slowly. "Can I help?" She handed him a stuffed giraffe. "Only if you're good at defense." "I've been in boardrooms for 30 years, he smirked. "Defense is my specialty." They built together for almost an hour. Jasmine gave each toy a title: Commander Bunny, General Bear, Sergeant Dino. She was meticulous in placing them. "You know," Daniel said, "fortresses are strong, but sometimes the best protection is someone standing in front of you. Like a shield." "Exactly. Would you be my shield?" He didn't hesitate. "Always." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Even if she's yelling? Even if she's stronger?" He brushed a curl from her forehead. "She can scream all she wants. I face worse than screams. And she'll never get to you again." Jasmine looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Okay." That night, the wind howled through the streets. Lightning danced along the horizon. Daniel sat up reading while Jasmine slept beside him. Her fingers curled into his sleeve, the photo of Morgan under her pillow. At 2:13 a.m., Daniel's phone buzzed. Morgan. He stepped out into the hallway to answer. "She's flipped," Morgan said. "Started talking 10 minutes ago." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "What changed?" "She saw your press release. The part where you said Jasmine was your daughter now. I think it rattled her. She realized she doesn't scare anyone anymore." "What did she say?" "Enough to open an old file," Morgan said. Turns out Morgan wasn't the only one she worked. There were other kids, other payments, possibly a ring. "We're digging, and we may need your help to open a few doors." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Send me everything." And Daniel, "Yes, you might want to be careful. She still talks like someone who's lost control and might try to get it back." Daniel's voice was still. "Let her try." The next morning, Jasmine woke to the smell of cinnamon and butter. She pattered downstairs in fuzzy socks, rubbing her eyes. Daniel was in the kitchen flipping French toast. A plate already waited for her, dusted with powdered sugar and shaped like a bear's face. Margaret had even made cocoa, marshmallows bobbing like tiny clouds. Jasmine sat at the table, still half asleep, and whispered, "Thanks, sir." He looked over his shoulder. "Always." She took a bite and sighed contentedly. But before she could swallow, her small voice broke through the quiet. "Sir, yes. If she came back and she tried to take me." Daniel turned to her fully now. "I won't let her. But if she lies, I'll tell the truth louder. But if she hurts me, she won't." His voice was steady. "Absolute. You're not a secret anymore. Jasmine, you're not lost. You're mine." She stared at him. Marshmallow stuck to her lip and whispered, "Okay." She believed him, because in that moment, she realized something more powerful than her fear. Storms had names too, but so did shields. The headlines came that Thursday morning, sweeping across every news feed and television screen in New York like a controlled fire. But this time, Daniel had lit the match himself. Billionaire Daniel Cross seeks full custody of daughter deceased street musician from towers to toy boxes. The new life of real estate tycoon Daniel Cross family, or facade. The story behind Cross's sudden transformation. The media didn't know what to make of it. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others whispered about guilt, a fall from power, or a late life breakdown. But none of them had sat across from Jasmine at breakfast, watching her cut her pancakes into tiny stars so no bite would be left behind. None of them had heard her call him, sir, like she'd always meant to. Daniel had expected judgment. What he hadn't expected was silence. At least not from his enemies. It was his friends who fell quiet. At the Carlton Club, where Daniel had been a member for nearly 2 decades, he found himself alone at the table he used to share with 4 other men. Founders, tycoons, men whose opinions shaped skyscrapers and elections. Daniel. One of them had said earlier that week, swirling a glass of brandy, "You've always been calculated. But this is messy." "Children are messy," Daniel replied. "But so is healing." Another leaned in. "Look, we all have regrets. But you've taken in someone else's mistake and made it yours." Daniel looked at them for a long time. Then he stood. "She's not a mistake," he said. "She's the first thing I've ever gotten right." He never returned to club after that. Meanwhile, across the city, in classrooms and cafes and crowded sidewalks, something else was happening. People read the headlines and didn't roll their eyes. They paused, because it wasn't just about a billionaire adopting a poor black girl. It was about a man admitting he had failed and choosing to change. It was about a child who had survived hell and now had a bedroom with painted stars on the ceiling and a window that didn't need bars. It was about justice, not in a courtroom, but in the quiet moments of choice. At school, Jasmine noticed it too. Her classmates, many of them used to whispering about her clothes, her skin, her silence, now asked to sit beside her. Some asked questions, curious but kind. One girl even handed her a drawing of 2 stick figures and a rainbow, labeled Jasmine and her new sir. Mrs. Monroe called Daniel that afternoon. "She smiled today," she said. "A real one." Daniel smiled back, even though she couldn't see it. She's starting to believe the good stuff stays. That evening, Daniel sat with Jasmine on the living room floor. They were piecing together a 1,000-piece puzzle, a snow-covered lighthouse against a navy sky. Jasmine liked puzzles. She said they made her feel like the world could fit together if you were patient enough. "I saw my name today," she said suddenly. "In the newspaper." Daniel stiffened slightly. "And what did you think?" Jasmine picked up a puzzle piece and twirled it between her fingers. "It was weird, like my story wasn't mine anymore." Daniel reached over and took the piece from her, placing it perfectly into a corner. "I know the feeling." "Did they lie?" "No," he said. "But they didn't tell the whole truth either." "What's the whole truth?" "That you're not a headline. You're a heartbeat." She looked at him, unsure. He smiled. "That means you're the center of something real, something alive. Not a thing to talk about, but a person to love." Jasmine tilted her head. "Does that mean they don't get to decide who I am?" "Exactly." She nodded. "Good." They returned to the puzzle in silence, the lighthouse beginning to take shape between their hands. Later that night, after Jasmine had gone to bed, Daniel sat on the rooftop terrace. The city glittered below, oblivious and infinite. For years, this view had made him feel powerful. Tonight, it made him feel small, but in a good way. Morgan joined him, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. "You've made some waves," he said. "I know. You're not exactly making it easy on the PR team." Daniel took a sip. "I'm not here to be easy. I'm here to be right." Morgan chuckled. "I got a call from a judge today. Said your guardianship hearing's been moved up. Apparently, someone high up put in a word." Henry arched a brow. "Friend of yours." Morgan shrugged. "Friend of someone Jasmine helped at school. Word spreads, Daniel. So does truth." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Morgan added, "You sure you're ready for the next chapter?" "I'm not sure of anything," Daniel admitted. "But she is, and sometimes that's enough." The courthouse stood like a monument to everything Daniel had once believed in. Structure, order, power. And yet, as he stepped through the heavy doors with Jasmine's tiny hand in his, it didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a proving ground. Linda Hayes met them at the security checkpoint, a leather-bound portfolio clutched in one hand, her other holding a scarf tight against the November wind. She smiled at Jasmine first. "You ready, little one?" Jasmine looked up, eyes wide but brave. "Will they ask if I want to stay?" "They might," Linda said gently, "and it's okay to say how you feel." Jasmine nodded, her hand tightening around Daniel's. Inside, the family court was quieter than the other chambers, less dramatic than TV would suggest. Still, the weight of what happened inside these walls could rewrite entire lives. They were led to a small waiting room, pastel-colored chairs, tissue boxes on every table. Jasmine whispered, "Is this where people get in trouble?" "No," Daniel said softly. "This is where people get second chances." Their case was scheduled for 10:45 a.m. sharp. Judge Rebecca Thornton, age 67, was known for being fair, but not forgiving. Her record was clean, her stare cutting. She had seen too many broken families to be easily impressed. She scanned the documents before her as Daniel and Linda approached the table. "And where's the child now?" she asked. Linda nodded toward the second row. "She's seated with Miss Margaret Green, Your Honor." Judge Thornton peered over her glasses. Her eyes softened slightly when she saw Jasmine sitting quietly, back straight, hands folded over the bear in her lap. "Jasmine," the judge asked. Jasmine stood up nervously. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know why you're here today?" Jasmine glanced at Daniel, then back at the judge. "To see if I can stay with my sir." "Do you want to stay with him?" Jasmine's chin lifted. "I need to." There was a silence that spread through the courtroom like spilled ink. Judge Thornton leaned back, lips tight, but her gaze lingered on the girl. "I've read the reports," she said. "Unorthodox beginnings, questionable legal trail, a tragic history." Daniel didn't flinch. "But also," she continued, "a stable environment now, a consistent caregiver, emotional growth in the child, and, surprisingly, a willingness from the petitioner to fully commit to long-term custody and emotional support." "I don't do things halfway, Your Honor," Daniel said calmly. Judge Thornton looked at him. "No, Mr. Cross, you don't." There was a pause. "Do you understand what it means?" she asked. "To be her legal parent, not just in name, but in every way. Through scraped knees, nightmares, first heartbreaks, and college applications?" Daniel's voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am. Do you understand that this child is not an accessory, not a project, not an atonement?" "I do." The judge leaned forward. "Then I'll ask you what I rarely ask in this courtroom, Mr. Cross." "Why?" Daniel looked at Jasmine, then back at the judge. "Because I was given a second chance," he said, "by a little girl who didn't even know what that meant. Because she trusted me before I'd earned it. Because love doesn't come when you deserve it. It comes when you show up for it." He paused. "And because if I fail her, then I fail everything that ever mattered." The courtroom was still. Even the stenographer blinked back a tear. Judge Thornton looked down at her papers, then signed her name with a slow, deliberate stroke. "I hereby grant full and permanent custody of Jasmine Rose Lang to Mr. Daniel James Cross." Jasmine gasped. Daniel smiled. He didn't pump a fist. He didn't sigh with relief. He simply stood, walked over the row, and knelt in front of the girl who had taught him what family meant. "It's official," he said. "Does that mean I'm really yours now?" she whispered. "You always were." She jumped into his arms. Behind them, the judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Cross?" He turned. "Yes, Your Honor?" She smiled just a hint. "Don't screw it up." Outside the courthouse, the wind had softened. Jasmine walked beside Daniel, swinging his hand back and forth. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "It's November." "Hot chocolate, then." He grinned. "Deal." As they approached the car, a woman called out from across the street, "Mr. Cross." Daniel turned. It was a journalist, young, out of breath, a press badge swinging from her neck. "Do you have a comment about today's ruling?" Daniel looked down at Jasmine, then back at the reporter. "Yes," he said. She raised her recorder. Tell them this. Justice isn't just what happens in court. Sometimes it's what happens in a child's heart when she finally hears the word home and believes it. The reporter blinked. Daniel opened the door for Jasmine, helped her in, and climbed in after her. As the car pulled away, Jasmine whispered, "Sir?" "Yes." "Do we have to tell everybody?" "No," he said. "Just the people who matter." She leaned against him. "Well, I think you matter." Daniel smiled. "That's the best headline I've ever heard." It had been 2 weeks since the courtroom, but Daniel noticed something he hadn't before, not just a change in Jasmine, but in himself. He laughed more now. He didn't bark orders at waiters or snap at late phone calls. His staff noticed too. Margaret started calling him Daniel instead of Mr. Cross when they were alone, an unspoken sign that he was finally joining the rest of the human race. But not everyone welcomed the change. At the office, Vincent Brooks had requested a meeting in person. "I'll be home by 4, Daniel told Jasmine that morning as he helped button her coat. She squinted at him. "Promise?" He crouched to her level. "Pinky swear." She hooked her pinky around his. And just before heading to school, she turned and said, "You don't have to smile all the time, sir, but I like it when you do." He smiled then, just for her, and then he left. Vincent waited in Daniel's former office, now Sophia's, though the plaque hadn't been changed yet. He sat like he always had, too stiff, too polished, like a man clinging to a ship already taking on water. "You're here," Daniel said, stepping inside. Clearly, Daniel took a seat across from him, noting the way Vincent didn't offer a handshake. "So," Daniel said, "how's the company holding up without me?" "Profits are stable. Your transition plan is working." "And yet," Daniel added, "you're here." Vincent didn't waste time. "People are talking, Daniel. Shareholders, clients. Your name's being associated with social work and charity foundations, not real estate, not leadership." Daniel smiled faintly. "And what exactly are you afraid of, Vincent?" "That I'll make decency look good." Vincent leaned in. "No, that you'll make it look trendy, like it's a phase. And when it ends, the fallout will bury us all." Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't a phase," he said. "This is the rest of my life." "You're throwing away legacy." Daniel stood. "No, I'm redefining it." Vincent scoffed. "You used to be feared." Daniel looked out the window toward the horizon where the city met the sky. "I used to be lonely, Vincent. There's a difference." He turned back to him. "Legacy isn't about your name being on buildings. It's about whether anyone whispers it at bedtime." Vincent blinked. "I don't expect you to understand," Daniel added, "but I do expect you to get out of the way." That afternoon, Daniel arrived at Jasmine's school 5 minutes early. He stood near the playground fence, watching her play with 2 girls from her class. They took turns jumping rope, while another counted. Jasmine was laughing, not the careful kind, the loud, unguarded kind. Mrs. Monroe approached him quietly. "She's different now," she said. "Freer. She's home now," Daniel replied. Mrs. Monroe smiled. "And you? Are you different?" He thought about it. "Yes," he said. "I used to check my watch when people talked too long. Now I forget I'm wearing one." She chuckled. "That's progress." The bell rang. Kids scattered. Jasmine ran to him. "Sir," she cried, "you're early." "Told you I would be. Can we go to the bookstore today? I want to find the next story about the dragon who gets adopted." He laughed. "Is that a series now?" "Everything's a series if you want it to be," she said seriously. He opened the car door for her. "Then let's go find your dragon." Later that evening, they stopped by Morgan's O Block. Jasmine asked to see it again. Not to cry, just to look. The building was quieter now, cleaner. One of the neighbors had started a mural on the side, a phoenix, wings wide, painted by local teens. "That's new," Daniel said. Jasmine stood still, studying it. "That's what he was, huh?" "Who?" "Sir Morgan," she said. "He burned, and came back, even if just for me." Daniel looked at her. "You're part of that, too." She stepped closer to the wall. A small white corner near the bottom had been left blank. She turned to him. "Can I write something?" Daniel looked around, then back at her. What do you want to say? She thought for a long time. Finally, she whispered, tell them he mattered. Daniel reached into his coat, pulled out a pen, and handed it to her. Her handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear. He mattered. She signed it with a simple heart. That night, Jasmine fell asleep early, curled beside the bed Daniel had repaired 3 times now. The house was quiet. Daniel stepped into his study, poured a glass of water, and looked at the framed photo of Morgan, the one where he held baby Jasmine with a pride that refused to fade even in death. You did good, kid, Daniel whispered. And I'm trying. The man who had once forgotten how to smile was now raising a girl who reminded him every day that love wasn't a threat. It was a reason. It started like any ordinary Saturday. Jasmine sat at the breakfast table in her oversized hoodie, slathering peanut butter onto pancakes with precision Daniel found both alarming and impressive. Margaret hummed from the kitchen, flipping bacon and sipping coffee between turns. Daniel sipped his own cup, the newspaper folded neatly beside him, unread. Can we go to the planetarium today? Jasmine asked, eyes hopeful. Daniel glanced at the calendar. Weren't we going to paint birdhouses? Birds don't float in space, sir. To that, he chuckled. I stand corrected. Just as Jasmine poured syrup with dramatic flair, the doorbell rang. Daniel checked his watch. 9:07 a.m. odd. He opened the front door to find Morgan standing there, not in his usual suit, but gray jacket, wind-blown hair, and a manila folder tucked under his arm. This early? Daniel asked, stepping aside. Morgan's face told him everything. This wasn't a social visit. Sorry, Morgan said quietly, but we found something. Daniel stiffened. Involving Rita? Morgan nodded. And Morgan? They sat in the study while Jasmine painted constellations on a cardboard box spaceship. In the living room, the door stayed cracked open. Daniel insisted. Morgan laid the folder on the desk. It turns out, he began, Morgan wasn't just protecting Jasmine from Rita. He was trying to get her out of something much worse. Daniel opened the folder. Photos, notes, a list of names. Morgan continued, voice low. There's evidence that Rita was connected to a network of people who placed vulnerable children for private caretaking, off-the-record arrangements. Cash only, no oversight. Jasmine was on that list. Daniel's jaw clenched. They were shopping her around like property. Morgan found out, Morgan said. That's why he disappeared for a time. He was hiding her. Daniel looked at one document. A payment record with Jasmine's initials and a transaction dated just a week before Morgan's death. I don't believe in coincidences anymore, Daniel said. Morgan shook his head. Neither do I. Daniel closed the folder, fist tight. And now, he asked, what happens to the others? We're building a case, Morgan said. It could take time, years even, but you've given us something real to start with. Daniel stood and paced toward the window, anger simmering in his chest. All those kids. Morgan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Henry turned. They'll come after her, won't they? Maybe not directly. But if any of them catch wind that you're digging, they'll want to discredit you or scare you off. Daniel's voice was cold steel. Let them try. Later that afternoon, Daniel found Jasmine on the rooftop terrace, lying inside her cardboard spaceship with her bear strapped in beside her. Commander Carter, he said, saluting. Do you copy? She looked up and giggled. Mission status. Safe. All systems go. May I enter the vessel? Only if you bring snacks. He held up a bag of apple slices and a juice box. Permission granted, she declared. He sat beside her, careful not to crush any of the painted stars. They looked up at the real sky, faint behind the city haze. Do you think people get scared when they go to space? She asked suddenly. I'm sure they do, he said. Why? Because even when you leave the world behind, he answered, you still carry everything that matters with you. Jasmine thought for a second. That's heavy. It is, he smiled. But it also keeps you grounded, even in space. They lay in silence for a moment. Then Jasmine whispered, were there other girls like me? Daniel didn't answer right away. Yes, he said finally. There were... She turned to him. Will you help them too? He met her eyes. I will. She nodded once, solemn. Good, because nobody else did. That night, after Jasmine had gone to bed, Daniel stood alone in Morgan's old room, the one Jasmine now called hers. He looked around at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the book she had left open on her pillow, the drawing of her and Daniel taped to the closet door. He thought of the other children, the other names in the file, the silence they lived in, the fear, the neglect, and he realized something. He had found his purpose, not just to be her father, but to be their voice. For every child who had been tossed aside and told they were unworthy, for every Morgan who had died protecting someone else's hope, he would speak, and when necessary, he would roar. It was a Thursday when the phone call came, not the kind of day that announces itself with warning signs or ominous clouds. Just a regular day with grocery lists and school pickup and the usual dance of ordinary things. Margaret answered the house line, a habit she'd never broken, and called for Daniel with a voice that trembled more than usual. There's someone on the line, she said softly. Says he knows something about Morgan, about the night he died. Daniel took the phone with quiet caution. This is Daniel Cross. The voice on the other end was raspy, uncertain. I wasn't going to say anything, the man began, but I saw the girl in the papers, and I knew I couldn't hold it anymore. Who is this? Name's Leon. I worked janitorial at the Granger building, night shift, 2 years ago. I was cleaning the back alley around 3 a.m. That's when I saw it. Saw him. Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. Saw who? Your son, Leon said. Morgan. He was bleeding, trying to carry the little girl. Said someone was coming. Told me to run. I didn't help. I ran like a coward. Daniel's voice dropped low. Do you know who was after him? I didn't then, but now I think I do. I saw the face of the woman, who showed up a minute later. Same one from the papers now. The one arrested. Rita Lang. Silence fell between them. I should have done something, Leon whispered. You just did, Daniel said. An hour later, Daniel sat across from Morgan in his apartment, the city humming below them. This changes the timeline, Morgan said, flipping through notes. If Rita was there that night and Morgan was trying to get Jasmine out, this could elevate the charges. We're not just chasing proof anymore, Daniel said. We're chasing a pattern. Morgan nodded. And patterns leave trails. Daniel stared out the window, his voice hardening. Then we follow every damn one of them. At school, Jasmine was quieter than usual. Mrs. Monroe noticed a difference. Her posture more slouched, her laugh more restrained. After art class, she gently pulled Jasmine aside. Everything okay? Jasmine shrugged. Mrs. Monroe knelt. You can tell me anything. Jasmine fiddled with the hem of her shirt. Sometimes I think if I smile too much, something bad will happen. Like I'm not supposed to be this happy. Mrs. Monroe's heart ached. You know what I think? She said. I think joy is brave. And you, Jasmine, are one of the bravest girls I know. Jasmine looked up. Even when I'm scared? Especially when you're scared. Jasmine nodded slowly, and then she smiled. That evening, Daniel sat Jasmine down after dinner. There's something we need to talk about, he said gently. She looked up, already sensing the weight. A man called today. He saw your father the night he... Daniel paused. The night he saved you. Jasmine's eyes welled. He did save me. I know he did, Daniel said, and we're going to honor that. We're helping the police find the people who hurt him. And you. Will they get in trouble? If we do our job right, yes. Jasmine was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, Does that mean we're going to tell my story too? Daniel nodded. Only if you're ready. She swallowed. What if it makes people mad? He leaned in, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then let them be mad. But don't ever be silent. 2 weeks later, Jasmine sat beside Daniel on a community center stage in front of an audience of parents, teachers, officers, and survivors. The event was small, meant to raise awareness about reforming child protective oversight. But for Jasmine, It felt like standing in the middle of a storm. The host handed her the mic. Her hands trembled, but she stood. "My name is Jasmine Roselang," she began, voice small but steady. "And I used to be invisible." She told them about hiding under beds, about skipping meals so Morgan could eat, about pretending to sleep when yelling started. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she was healing. And at the end, she said, "I'm not a secret anymore, and neither are the others." The room stood. Some wept. Daniel didn't applaud. He just stood up and walked to her, pulled her into his arms. "Did I do good?" she asked against his shoulder. "You changed everything," he whispered. Back home, after the lights and the questions and the hugs from strangers, Jasmine sat on her bed, holding her bear close. "Sir?" "Yes." "Do you think Morgan saw?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of her bed, looked at the stars on the ceiling, the one she'd made him promise never to repaint. "I think he never stopped watching." Jasmine nodded. "Okay, then I hope he knows I'm okay now." Daniel smiled. "He knows, Jasmine. He knows." Outside, the city lights pulse, not with noise, but with presence. And in the quiet that followed, Daniel felt something rise in his chest. A roar. Not made of sound, but of purpose. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a path. And they were walking it together. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel something, pause for a moment or see life a little differently. Please don't let it end here. These stories take heart, time, and care to create, and your support is what keeps them alive. Subscribing, liking, or sharing isn't just a click. It's a quiet way of saying this mattered. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please stay with us.